Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So, as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, we are having the age-old conversation once again, this time with the slant of bookish influencers are lying to you. They're not actually reading 20 books per month. They don't actually read 200 plus books per year. They don't do X, Y, and Z. It's just performative. And this is a conversation that happens in a variety of ways, multiple times a year. And it's under the conversation of reading being promoted. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but it's under the umbrella conversation of reading being performative and social media making reading performative, which I do think has happened. And I do think that there are definitely some bookish content creators, bookish influencers who say they read 20 books a month when they don't. But there are people like me who get close to 20 books or read over 20 books. And there's a lot to consider when having this conversation, and it's thankfully it hasn't been one-sided, because a lot of the bookish influencers and content creators have come up and spoken out and said, like, okay, this conversation is stupid, because it is stupid. And because of how many people were coming out and saying, no, not every bookish influencer is lying to you, because of how many videos and posts there were. At first I was gonna do a video on this conversation, and then I was like, no. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do it later in the year, because if I do it later in the year, it'll be like the pre-2027 reminder. And then I was just like, you know what, let me just do this now, because obviously I want to talk about it. And like I said, it's kind of under a bunch of discussions, a bunch of umbrella discussions. It's under a bunch of the umbrella discussions surrounding reading and reading being performative. And like I said, that does happen. And in many cases, there are quite a few people who do performative reading, or maybe they're just saying they read through it and they only skim through a book, or they skim through that many. And like I said, that is the case, that there are people who do that and will say, I read 20 books when they didn't. But that doesn't mean that all bookish influencers, all bookish content creators are lying to you. It's kind of like, what's a good comparison? It's kind of like saying to someone who, like, the most common comparison that I've seen is if someone sits down and binges 8 episodes, an 8 episode season of a show in one sitting in one night. That's normal. But the minute someone sits down and reads a full 400-page book in one sitting, now that's weird. So it's like, that's the most common comparison. So it's like finishing a multiple episode, multiple season show in one sitting or one day is normal, or gaming for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time is normal. But the minute someone spends 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours reading, that's all of a sudden not normal. So it's like, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit later, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, you wouldn't tell a gamer that they didn't actually spend 8 hours gaming. Or you wouldn't tell someone, oh, you didn't actually watch that full show in one sitting. Like, you didn't do that. Like, you might, but it's like, if they can tell you exactly what happened from start to finish of that show, you're not going to tell them you didn't watch the show. But when someone actually read a 400-page book in one sitting and can tell you what happened start to finish, all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you didn't actually read it. And if they like, and it's one of those things too where it's like, just because you don't remember every single little thing you read about, let me reset that. Just because you don't remember every single little thing that happens from cover to cover in every single book you read does not mean that you did not read every single book that you've said you read. Now, there are some books I can probably like pull out a couple on my shelves. There are some books where it's like, yes, I read them. I remember what happened cover to cover. And a lot of these books I read as audiobooks. And it's like, I can tell you what happened cover to cover in Hopeless Necromantic. I can tell you what happened cover to cover, book to book in the Stalking Dr. Ripper series. I can tell you what happened cover to cover, book to book in the first 4 books of the Hannah Swenson series. So Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder, Blueberry Muffin Murder, Lemon Meringue Pie Murder. Is that the third one? I think that's the third one. Yeah. There's just so many, and it's like, it's all like baked good murder. Baked good murder. And it's like, I can tell you what happened in those books. And again, I read them as audiobooks, but it's like, that's another conversation. But it's like, I can tell you what happened cover to cover. And there's some physical books. I can tell you what happened cover to cover in The Hobbit. I can tell you what happened cover to cover in Lord of the Rings. I can tell you what happened cover to cover in Magic Knight Rares. I can tell you what happened cover to cover in Heaven Official's Blessing. I can tell you what happened in a lot of these books. And then there are other books where I'm like, I don't remember anything from that book. I remember it made me happy. And it's like, sometimes I need to go back to the book, go back to my review, go back to the description, and be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. And it's like, when you're reading multiple books a year, that happens. And like, with the day and age that we're in, with how inundated with information, with actual facts, and with false facts, false truths, falsities parading as truths, with how inundated with that we are due to social media, due to news outlets having social media platforms, due to the internet, it's like, yeah, we're not going to remember every single thing we've read. Because a lot of us are on social media, a lot of us are on our phones pretty regularly, even if we're trying to cut down on our screen times. A lot of us are reading, but we're also on our phones, and we're inundated with social media posts. We're inundated with the recent Bookish drama. We're inundated with the recent social media drama, with the recent political drama, whatever have you. So it's like, with how much information we're inundated with, true and false, yeah, like, reading is our escape. And yeah, we're not going to remember every single little thing about every single book we read. And like, there are some books that I read that, like, I don't remember reading this year, but the minute I see it in like my read list, in like my read section on the Storygraph app, I'm like, oh yeah, I read that. And then I have to go to it and be like, okay, yeah, I didn't enjoy this as much, or it was okay. And like, a lot of the times, the ones that we don't recall right away are the ones that, even if we enjoyed it, it's not the ones that we love, like, wholeheartedly. Like, I love The Hobbit, I love Lord of the Rings, I love Hopeless Necromantic, I love Heaven Official's Blessing, I love Magic Knight Rares, I love the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. And those ones, because I love them so much, it's like, I recall them a lot easier. And even with books that I love, like, sometimes I don't remember every single detail. Like, with Six Crimson Cranes, I love that series, but it takes me a little bit of time to like recall some of the details. And then with Heaven Official's Blessing, no, not that one. With Hopeless Necromantic, like, I can tell you exactly why I love the book, but the minute you ask me to explain it, I'm like, like, when my sister got the physical copy for me, I gave her some money to get me the physical copy. She was like, oh yeah, I was reading the back, like, what's it about? And I was like, I can't explain, but I can explain, like, basically, Hesper has to, like, take Sikras, and, like, they have to go defeat the evil wizard. But it's like, the minute you ask me to explain, like, my brain freezes for a moment, because it's like, how do I explain this? How do I explain how much I love this book, and why I love this book so much? So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, either we love it so much we don't know how to explain it, or it was a good popcorn read, because, like, we're not going to remember, like, popcorn reads are basically the books that are like palate cleansers, where it's like, you're not necessarily reading it expecting a whole lot. It's like popcorn. It is light, it is fluffy, it is satisfying in the moment, but it's not it's satiating in the moment, but it's not and it's filling, but it's not necessarily like something that you would rely on regularly as a good form of sustenance. And not to say that popcorn isn't good. There are some really good popcorns out there. So there are some really good popcorn reads out there, but it's not necessarily what you would go to for your reading sustenance. So anyway, with all of that said, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. I'm going to go into some reasons as to some ways as to how bookish content creators read more, but I do want to say that this discussion in general, from what I've seen from most of the videos and posts about this, and my video specifically, it's not meant to shame people who do not read as much, and it is not meant to shame you if you cannot read as much, or to discourage you if you don't or can't read as much. But just, it's one of those things where just because you cannot or don't, just because you cannot or do not read as much doesn't mean that other people cannot or do not read that much. So it's like, it's one of those things where you have to keep in mind. And like I said in my thumbnail, like, they're bookish influencers, bookish content creators aren't, not all of them are lying, but that doesn't mean you go in blindly. And yeah, you, like, social media is a facade. Social media is not 100% true to real life. It is a facade. It is a persona. It is an aspect of life that people are putting out there. And a lot of the times, a lot of bookish content creators, myself included, have full-time jobs, have a job that is their main source of income, and then bookish content creation, if it is a source of income, is a passive side income that is less than their main income. So it's like, that is something to keep in mind. Like, a lot of us have regular 9 to 5 type jobs, like I said, myself included. So a lot of the times when you see bookish content creators who are reading 10 to 15 to 20 plus bucks a month, it is because they are actively making time to read books, and they're actively carving out that time to read. And again, like, it is one of those situations where not everyone can do this. Not everyone has the luxury to be able to carve out time to read books. And sadly, reading is a luxury now. And part of that is the consumerist capitalist mindset of having a price tag, having a somewhat of a steep price tag on books, and having it fall into this consumerist mindset with how many special editions there are of books that it's no longer special, and it's fucking insane. Like, I fallen victim to it. Like, I have like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 5 editions of Lord of the Rings. I have 1, 2, 3 editions of The Hobbit. I have 2 editions of The Silmarillion. Like 2 editions, 3 editions of Unfinished Tales. I have two editions of Heaven Official's Blessing, the first volume. I have 2 editions of Magic Knight Rare. I've fallen victim to it. So, but it's like, I'm trying to be a little bit more conscious about it and more aware. But it's like, we're in a situation that consumerist capitalist mindset, like I said, and special editions are a very good case study of this, with how many special editions there are. Like, looking at, with Lord of the Rings, I feel like it's a little bit easier to have multiple special editions with how long Lord of the Rings has been out. And when it was first published, like, it's had a lot more time to get multiple editions and have certain special editions. But if you look at like ACOTAR or Fourth Ring, it's like those have gotten to the point where there's so many different editions that they're no longer special editions, and they're just editions. And it's like, but they're being marketed as special editions because it's a different edition. So that's besides the point. My point being for this video, that oftentimes, like I said, just repeating myself here, oftentimes bookish, sorry, my alarm went off, but oftentimes bookish content creators and bookish influencers will be intentionally carving out time to read. And like I said, this is a luxury, sadly, and it's not a luxury everyone can afford to do because of jobs, because of family, whatever have you. So it's just, sadly, that is the case. But just because you don't have as much time to carve out for reading as other people do doesn't mean you can't also carve out small bits and pieces of time to read. So with all that said, I'm gonna go into, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 16 reasons. I have 16 ways bookish content creators, bookish influencers carve out time, create time to read more. Let me just adjust this real quick. There we go. So the first way is actively making time to read. And this one seems so obvious, and it's kind of on the nose there with it being what I'm saying, like, that they're doing. But, like, that is, like, the first and foremost thing to do. Like, if you want to read more, you have to actively make time to read more. And it's like, maybe when you have a quiet moment, like, even if you're only reading a paragraph, like, you sit down, you pick up a book, you read a paragraph, and then maybe like an hour later you have a couple minutes, you sit down again, you read another paragraph. So it's like, it's that mentality of actively sitting down and choosing to pick up a book and read it. Like I said, even if it's just a single paragraph, even if it's just a single page, actively sitting down, picking up a book, choosing a book, whether it's physical, ebook, or audiobook, actively picking up a book, reading a paragraph, reading a page, listening to 5 minutes of an audiobook. It's actively carving out that time to read. And that is like the first and most basic step to do with this. I feel like my voice kind of cracked there, and I have no idea why. But that's like the first freaking step to do. At the end of the day, it's like, even if you can only squeeze in 5 minutes of reading right before bed, like for me, I always try to read right before bed. I have a book on my book stand, which I'm kind of using to prop you guys up for recording. But I have a book on my, it's not really a nightstand, but like I have a bookshelf here that I have my cookbooks and like craft stuff on. But it's like, I have a book that I have my physical current read, my current physical read on the shelf, and I always pick it up, even if I only read a page of it. I actively like have the book next to me, and I'll pick it up and read. And sometimes it's a little bit awkward because I have my bunny at night, and her foot's been bugging her a lot lately, so she can't hop down from my bed anymore, which she used to be able to do, but just because she's getting older. So now I just cuddle her and she's up against my leg. So sometimes it's a little bit more awkward to read. But I usually at the very least try to read a page a night. 1 to 2 pages. Ideally I would want to read like a chapter or two. But even like at the very, very minimum, I actively try to read a page a night. Because then that way I'm reading. And then the second point is having a more defined schedule for when you read. Like I said, usually I'm trying to read right before bed. I usually have like a 30 to 45 minute wind down period where I'm cuddling with my bunny on my bed, and I start playing my audiobook since usually it's a book that I've already read. I have my audiobook playing because I need something playing to go to bed. So I have that playing just so it's already playing, and we're good to go for when I'm ready to go to bed. And I have a book, and then that's when I read. And also, I listen to audiobooks. So usually at work, since like oftentimes what I have to do for work is not like, obviously I have to pay attention to make sure I'm doing it correctly, but it's more of like a repetitive type motion, so I don't have to pay. I still have to pay like 80 to 90% attention to my work, but I can still listen to an audiobook while I'm working. So usually, and my work days are about like 7 hours, so usually I can knock out at the very least, I can get through a good chunk of an audiobook if it's over 7 hours. But if it's under 7 hours, I can get through like a book to a book and a half during my work day. And it really depends on the length of the audiobook. Like I said, if it's under 7 hours, I can knock a book out and then start on another one. If it's over 7 hours, I can usually get a 7 hour chunk read. So usually within a book, I can listen to about, I would say, anywhere between 3 to 8 books per week, audiobook. Excuse me. I'm so sorry about that. I can usually listen to about 3 to 8 books on average per week. And like I said, that usually just varies depending on how long the audiobook is, and that does not include my physical reads. And then I can get through about 1 to 1.5 reads, physical books per week. So I'm reading anywhere between 4 to 9 books per week, depending on lengths and how much I'm actually able to read each week. Because sometimes I do have to pause the audiobook at work for a good amount of time when I have to pay a little bit more attention to what I'm doing. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I have a more defined schedule, like audiobooks at work, audiobooks in the morning when I'm getting ready, or like when I'm washing my face and doing my morning routine. When I'm doing my nighttime routine after I get out of the shower, I'll put on an audiobook. Like I said, I'll read some of my physical book. So I have defined times and places. I have a more defined schedule for when I'm reading and what I'm reading during certain times. So there's that. And then the third one is, okay, so I was just looking at this one and I was like, it says LBS. And this one point, I was like, I don't know where that came from. But anyway, I think I know what this is supposed to say. So the third one is using audiobooks during the times where they can't do a physical book. So like I said, I can't be reading a physical book at work. So I pop in an audiobook. And when I'm doing my morning routine, it's a little bit more awkward to be like doing a physical book or holding my phone doing an ebook. So my other bunny, she's in the room right now and I just heard her stretch. Anyway, so like sometimes it's awkward to be holding a phone reading an ebook. So that's a good time to have an audiobook playing when you're doing like chores, like doing the dishes or doing vacuuming, like popping an AirPod, popping in an earbud, a headphone, pop on some headphones, listen to an audiobook. So utilize audiobooks when you can't do physical books or it's awkward to do physical or ebooks, because that's a good way to get some more time read. And if you leave a comment saying that audiobooks do not count as reading, I'm going to be deleting your comment, because they absolutely do count as reading. And that is a very able statement to say that they do not count as reading. So the next one, number 4, is reducing screen time. This is something that personally I am actively working on, and it's something that is like a continuous thing you work on. And it's something that I've been more aware of now that I'm keeping track of it and now that I'm aware of it. But there are times where I spend 4, 5, 6, 7 hours on my phone, and that's actively interacting with the screen, and it's what was I doing for 6 hours on my phone? And so it's that's time I could be spending reading a physical book. That's time that I could be listening to an audiobook, doing some, I just hit myself in the face with this, doing some crochet. That's time where it's I'm not really in my ebook phase right now. I'm just in my physical, I'm really in my audiobook phase right now. I'm in my audiobook era. But it's that's if you're reading ebooks, that definitely factors into screen time. But so it's if ebooks are your screen time, great, perfect. But it's I think part of the reason why I'm not really in my ebook era is because I don't have an e-reader device. I have my iPad, but then it's I get so distracted with some of the games that I have on my iPad or the ones that I have on my phone that I'm gonna get distracted. So it's I do want to get an e-reader at some point, and I'm gonna see if I can save up my Barnes & Noble rewards to get a Barnes & Noble Nook device. That'll be a little while though before I can do that. Anyway, besides the points. So it's like reducing your screen time or actively using your screen time to be reading ebooks. And that is like a really great way to be reading more, because like I want you to pause this video in a moment. I'll tell you exactly when to pause, but what I want you to do is go to your settings or go to wherever you access screen time and take a look at how many hours you spent on your screen today. Pause the video now and then start playing again when you're back. I'll give you a moment. Okay, we're back. Great. So basically, I know like the other week, like I had like 1 or 2 days where it was like upwards, my screen time was upwards of like 7, 8 hours. I was like, what the heck was I doing? And like sometimes like I had to, because it's like with my work, sometimes we'll have to like take pictures of something. So usually what will happen is like I'll take pictures on my phone and then I'll airdrop it to the work phone. Just because like the work phone camera is a little bit wonky right now. So it's like that's what I'll do. So like that factors a little bit into the screen time on more than a few occasions. But it's like, what was I doing on my phone? Okay, part of it might have been a big chunk from my lunch break. And then in the morning, because I wake up about an hour and a half before I have to leave. So it's like, okay, an hour and a half there, about 15 to 30-ish minutes on my lunch break. That's 2 hours accounted for. Okay, so I get off at this time, and that's another like 4 hours. Okay, it's making sense. I'm spending like 6 hours on my phone, and I can kind of see where. And that's 2 hours, like an hour and a half in the morning, 30-minute lunch break, 4 hours between when I get home and roughly when I start settling down for bed. And so it's like all that time can be dedicated to reading. I can be spending an hour and a half listening to an audiobook in the morning and crocheting. And like I do spend about half an hour cuddling one of the bunnies that we have, another one of the bunnies. But it's still, that's half an hour I could be listening to an audiobook. And then 15 to 30 minutes I can be listening to an audiobook on my lunch break. And again, I do listen to audiobooks at work. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, kind of like if I didn't listen to audiobooks at work, it's like, okay, I could be spending 15 to 30 minutes reading an ebook. I could be spending that hour and a half reading an ebook in the morning. I can spend another hour or so reading a physical book or reading some more of the ebook or whatever it is. But reducing the screen time really helps out a lot, because again, like you wouldn't be telling someone who, and like screen time, you can only really look at your phone, but it's like, okay, how much time are you sitting in front of the TV or an iPad or a computer watching videos or watching shows or watching movies? Not that these are like bad things, and like I'm very much a movie and TV show lover, and it's just one of those things to ask, like, okay, how much time are you spending like I said, sitting in front of a screen, another screen of some sort, a TV, a computer, an iPad, and playing a movie or a show or watching YouTube videos. And again, not that this is bad. I'm recording YouTube videos right now. I have YouTube videos up and scheduled to go up. So it's like, these things aren't inherently bad, but like I said earlier, you're not going to be like sitting down and saying like, oh no, you didn't watch that full show, or oh no, you didn't binge through that one YouTuber's all of their videos, or oh no, you didn't watch all of those movies in one day. Like, you're not going to be telling someone that. So it's like, why are we telling readers, oh no, you didn't read that many books in one go, oh no, you didn't read that book in one day? As a matter of fact, me listening to Lemon Meringue Murder would say otherwise, because I can tell you what happened in Lemon Meringue Murder. I'm not going to, because that would spoil the fun, but like, I could tell you what happened in Lemon Meringue Murder. I could tell you what happened in Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. I can tell you what happened in Escaping from Houdini. I can tell you what happened in Hopeless Necromantic. I didn't read those, I read some of the Stalking Jack the Ripper series in one day. I did not read Hopeless Necromantic in one day. And then the Hannah Swenson series, the Baked Good Murder, so Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. And some of those I read in a day. Some of them I didn't. Some of them technically counted as a day, but it was over the course of 2 days. But that's besides the point. So reducing screen time. And something else I've personally been trying to do is usually if I need some time like away, because it's like I'm at work and I handle a lot of the customer service at work too. So it's like sometimes I'm like I need to not talk to anybody and just be like no. Not actually no, but it's like I need to like not interact with anybody. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll step away, have my dinner, and I'll watch a YouTube video. And then what I'll do is I won't watch anything else, and then I'll put on an audiobook after I eat. Put on an audiobook and then do some crafting, or pull out one of my puzzle books because I have puzzle books. This is one of them. Now I need to put it back. So like after I eat some food when I get home, like I'll actively tell myself like, okay, no more videos, no more movies. Sit down, read, and do some crafting. And oftentimes I'll also craft while watching one of my comfort shows like Hilda or DuckTales. But like sometimes I'm like, okay, I need it. Like usually I do that when I'm like, I need to like not think about anything and not pay attention. So like having Hilda or DuckTales on in the background is a good way to do that, because I've watched those so many times at this point that I'm like, okay, I know where I'm at. And then the occasional check-in, okay, I know where I'm at. So reducing screen time, whole point of that, reducing screen time to focus more on reading, especially when it concerns like physical books and even audiobooks, and then being able to do other things while listening to audiobooks. So the next one is utilizing local libraries and library apps like Libby. And this one is really good because oftentimes one, it relieves some of like the financial strain of buying books that are more of a quote unquote risk, in the sense of like you might not enjoy it. It's a financial risk in that sense. So it's like utilizing your local library or the library app, or a library app like Libby. Like you can borrow a book as an ebook or as an audiobook, and then you can read it and be like, okay, I like this book. And then that way, like if you're kind of like me, where you don't have a whole lot of space for physical books, and you can't be buying all these, like you can't be doing like 5 to 10 plus book hauls every single time you go book shopping, then the library is a really good way to, one, save up on money, and two, not have to worry about where you're going to put the books. Because if you're using like your local library, the physical library, you're going to return the book after about 3 weeks, unless you renew your loan. You're going to return the book after a certain amount of time, at the very least after 3 weeks. And if it's through Libby, if you're doing an audiobook or an ebook through Libby, you don't have to worry about storing that because it's on your phone or your e-reader device, first off. And again, it'll be returned after a while. So it's like, you don't have to worry about space. You don't have to worry about the financial commitment to a book you might not enjoy. So there's that. That's a really good way to do it. The next one is kind of lends into this, or kind of lends into the library one, but it's not buying every single book we want to read. And I've been using my local library, and I've been using Libby a lot lately, because it's like, oh, there's that book, oh, there's this book, oh, there's that book. So it's like, there's so many books coming out that it's like, ideally I would love to own every single book, but it's like that's not financially feasible for me, and that's not spatially feasible for me. So it's like, I can't buy every single book I want to read. So Libby app. So borrowing it from my local library. And oftentimes, like, you do see quite a few bookish content creators and bookish influencers with books upon books upon books, and that is perfectly fine, a-okay. But at the same time, it's like, oftentimes you see them being pretty selective with what they're choosing to buy because of how many books they have. So it's that kind of a thing where it's like, most bookish content creators and influencers are not buying every single book they want to read. And oftentimes, especially with the bigger ones, they are being sent a lot of the books. So So there's also that to factor in. But to move on to the next one, um, do, do, do. So a good way to do this, a good way to try to read some more, is doing like a timed reading stint. So set a timer for 5 minutes and just read. Set a timer for 10 minutes. If you have longer stretch of time, set a timer for a longer amount of time and just sit down, read. Listen to an audiobook. If you're listening to an audiobook, most audiobook apps have some sort of timer feature. Usually it's like the sleep feature where it's like the crescent moon. So like set that as a timer. Do it until the end of the chapter. Do it for 5 minutes. Do it for 10 minutes. And then once it's done, you're good. You've listened to 5 minutes. You've listened to 10 minutes. For an ebook, set a timer on your phone. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And kind of like with earlier, like you like kind of like with what I was saying earlier. With you only have to read a paragraph, you only have to read a page. You do not have to be spending like 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes plus. You don't have to be spending all this time reading. Like I said, do 5 minutes. 5 minutes, depending on how fast or slow you read, can be a single page or can be a few pages. It can be a chapter. It does not matter. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Just read for 5 minutes. It does not have to be some long reading stint. So the next one is DNFing books they aren't enjoying. So oftentimes I will see a lot of bookish content creators and influencers DNFing books, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who are like I will never DNF a book, and it's like that's fine, but I feel like it's something that needs to be considered because I feel like this is definitely a sentiment that is happening a lot lately. And it's the not reading books you are enjoying because there are so many other books out there that you will enjoy. It's that sentiment. And it's like, it's a very true sentiment because there are 2 books that I read this year that I did not enjoy as much. And I forced myself to finish them. And it's like, it's not that it was like a bad choice to finish them, but these 2 books, like I gave 2.75 stars to them, and if I decided to DNF them when I thought about DNFing them, I could have gotten to some of my other books much sooner. Like I could have gotten to Hopeless Necromantic sooner. I could have gotten to Shrouded Queen much sooner. I could have gotten to the Stalking Jack the Ripper series sooner. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, imagine your top 3 favorite books of the year so far this year. And if you had finished, let's say, so imagine your top 3 favorite books so far this year. And imagine your bottom 2 books for this year. If you had DNF'd your bottom 2 books this year, you could have gotten to your top 3 books of the year sooner if you hadn't already read them. So it's that kind of a thing. Put it in that kind of a context. So most bookish content creators will DNF books that they're not enjoying and then move on to the next one. And then maybe that one they read immediately after the book that DNF'd, that they DNF'd. Maybe that next book is their best book of 2026. So it's like, it's that possibility. Like, okay, my next book could be my next, I don't want to get your hopes up, but like, hey, my next read could be my best book of 2026. So let me DNF this book now. So it's that kind of like, if you're not enjoying the book, it is a-okay to DNF it. So the next one is having more defined TBR piles, even when they're mood readers. And this oftentimes really helps. I am very much not a TBR girly, but often there are some times where I'm like I did it in a couple of my reading vlogs where in my August reading vlogs, or not, there weren't really August reading vlogs, but in my summer 2026 reading vlogs, I kind of called it a loose TBR pile, and that's what they were, but that did kind of help. Like, the reason why they were loose TBR piles is because I was like, okay, I don't have to get to these, but these would be good summer reads, and I think a majority of them I did get to at some point in the summer. But it was one of those things where it was like, having somewhat of a defined TBR pile did help with, like, figuring out what I was going to read next, at least physically. And then that way it's like, I was like, okay, so these were the books I had. Which one am I in the mood for? So it's like, even if you're a mood reader, having something a little bit more defined with what's next on the docket for your reads, it's like that can help you being like, okay, I'm in the mood for this book right now. I'm in the mood for this book. Okay, this is my choice. We're going with it. So it's that kind of a deal, you know? And then the next one is, it's something that I've talked about a bit on my channel already. But reading 2 to 3+ books at the same time. This one can be a little bit tricky just because for me, like, I do read no more than 2 books at the same time, but there is a way to kind of, I don't want to say finagle it, but there's a way to approach it in a way that you won't get the stories confused, because oftentimes people will say, like, how do you not get the stories confused? How do you not get the characters confused? And my biggest tip in this regard is, oftentimes what I do is I will have different genres. It's either going to be different genres, so it'll be like a fantasy book and then a murder mystery, or like it'll be epic fantasy and then a cozy murder mystery, or a cozy fantasy. So it'll either be kind of genres like that, or it'll be a situation where it's like different time periods. So one book could be like an epic fantasy set in, let's say 1200s India, and then the other will be a cozy fantasy set in a world that's kind of similar to 1900s USA, you know? So it's that kind of a thing where it's like either doing different genres or doing different time periods, or books that are reminiscent of certain time periods. Because with fantasy, at least, it's like you're not necessarily going to have something that is exactly like our world, but they'll take, a lot of times fantasy will take inspiration from different mythologies. So it's like, okay, one book could be Indian mythology, the other will be indigenous mythology, or one will be Slavic mythology, and then the other will be Korean mythology. So it's like doing either genres that are different, or doing source materials, or like inspirations that are vastly different, so you're not going to get the stories confused. And also, it's like, it's something that I can think of too, is that, let's take the story of Cinderella, for example. That is such a common story amongst so many cultures that, like, but oftentimes they are different enough that it'll be like, oh, this was a Cinderella story. Okay. And then, like, you catch on a little bit later. So it's like, if one book was inspired by Cinderella, or is a Cinderella-esque story, maybe another book is a Snow Queen inspired story, where it's like 2 very different stories right there. Maybe one book is a Red Riding Hood inspired story, and then the other is, I don't know how close Snow White is. I mean, depends on what source material you're looking at. But let's say like Red Riding Hood, and then the Frog Prince or Princess and the Frog, you know. So it's like choosing inspiration, source materials, or inspired bys that are different from each other. So all that to say, reading 2 to 3 books at the same time can really help. And like I said, usually I will read about 2 to 3. And another good tip in regarding this is, maybe one book is a physical book, a second book is an audiobook, and then a third book is the ebook. And that's also a good differentiator between genres. Like, your ebook could be sci-fi, your audiobook could be romance, and then your physical book could be murder mystery. That kind of a deal, you know? So it's like, that can help differentiate between the different genres and between the different stories. Or like, your audiobook could be Cinderella, your ebook could be Red Riding Hood, and then your physical book could be Little Mermaid. That kind of a deal. So 2 to 3 books at the same time, different formats, different stories. Sorry I'm pausing so much during this. It's like, I'm trying to drink water off camera, and I'm trying to not be so gassy on camera either, because I'm kind of burpy today. So anyway, besides points, the next one, 2 to 3 books at the same time, utilizing all book formats. That's what I just talked about. So 1 book audiobook, 1 book physical book, 1 book ebook. Don't discriminate on a book format just because you're not used to it. Try it out for a little bit, because again, that can really help in multiple situations. Like having an ebook, most ebooks can be accessed on your phone. Like you can access Libby on your phone. There's a Libby app for a reason. So, and through that you can borrow ebooks and audiobooks, and you'll have a book everywhere you go. And then physical books can be taken most places throughout your home, and they can be taken to a few different situations as well. So it's like taking them, like using different formats and using them in different scenarios. So the next one is pacing their reading. So it's like, I kind of touched on this for myself earlier, but something that I talked about earlier was before bed, usually 30 to 40 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And once I'm kind of like at that, in that 30 to 45 minutes, like if I'm done, I'm done. Even if I'm not fully ready to go to bed yet, if I'm at a point where I'm feeling like I'm done reading, I'll stop. So it's like, it really is about pacing. And a comparison I like making in a few different scenarios is you don't start off running a marathon by running the full marathon. You build up. And even if you're an experienced reader, even if you've been reading years, there are days where it's like, I do not feel like reading. So don't force it. Pace the reading, because at the end of the day, forcing it, not pacing it, that's a good indicator of potentially forcing a reading slump, or potentially an oncoming reading slump. So pace yourself. If you're not feeling like reading, don't read. But if you feel like reading, read. So pace yourselves. So the next one is tracking their reading in a way that works for them, even if it's not daily. And sometimes daily works for quite a few people and quite a few readers, and I love that for them. But oftentimes what happens is, if you're not reading every single day, like sometimes there are days where I do not feel like reading. And so it's like, I can't track my reading every single day, because then I'm just like, okay, well, I didn't read anything today, so I can't update, or I only read a page, and that doesn't feel like progress, quote unquote. And that's a thinking that I have to get out of mentally, and I know I have to get out of that. But it's still kind of that thought process that's there. So it's like, what works for me, again, this is something I've talked about on my channel before, but what works for me is I will update on Thursdays and Fridays, because then I can kind of psych myself into like, oh, I actually made some progress, even if it's not a lot. Like, I read like 5 more pages this past week. Hey, I read 5 pages this week. So not Thursday and Friday, I'll update on Fridays and Saturdays, because then it's like, okay, how much progress did I make in the book? How much have my thoughts changed over the week, like since my last update? That kind of a thing. Even if I'm not doing a reading vlog, oftentimes I'm not, but it's like I can still kind of reminisce about what I'm thinking about the book and how I'm feeling about where it's going. So tracking reading in a way that works for them, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly, however it is, they track their books, they track their reading in the best way that works for them and how they engage with the books. So the next one is, I think we're on number 14. The next one is kind of like what I was saying. It's kind of piggybacking off of the previous one, but being okay with not reading daily, because that happens. Life gets in the way. Sometimes you just get too busy to read. Sometimes you're not in the mood to read. Sometimes you're like, I can't. Even if you're in the mood for reading, sometimes it's just like, I can't read today. Okay, I don't want to read today. Okay, I can't read today. That's okay. So being okay with not reading daily. And for me, that was also partly why, like, I no longer update daily. I'll do it for like the January Pages challenge on the Storygraph app, but like, I don't do it daily anymore, because like I said, I don't always read every day. And sometimes what also happens is that, like, I'll get through an audiobook in a day, but then the next audiobook I pick up is taking like 3, 4, or 5 days, and it's like, not that that's discouraging, but it's like, because I can't finish a book every single day, it's like, okay, I just finished one, and the next one's going to take like 3, 4 days, or however long it is. Okay, I'll just update as I finish it, that kind of deal. And then also, too, it's like, since a majority of my audiobook reading is done at work, I don't, like, I'll still listen to like a couple of minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes over the course of the weekend on Saturday, and then on Sunday, so maybe like 20 to 30 minutes over the course of the weekend. And it's like, okay, 20 to 30 minutes, like, yes, that's still really good, but it's still only 20 to 30 minutes. So sometimes what will happen is, like, yeah, I'm not going to be reading as much of the iBook over the weekend. And that's also okay. So it's like being okay with not reading daily, being okay with not reading as much in comparison to previous days, all okay. So the next one is having other hobbies to do aside from reading. And this really helps with the burnout and avoiding the reading slump, as it's called within the reading community, where it's like, sometimes you just hit a point where, like, you're hitting a brick wall with reading, the reading slump, and you're like, I can't read. I want to read, but I cannot read. I want to, but I cannot. So it's like other hobbies help balance that out. I was showing my crochet earlier. Like having crochet, having the puzzle books, having baking, that kind of balances out my hobbies, because then it's like, if I'm doing more of one thing, it's like, hey, I'm excited to read again. And it's like, hey, I'm like, if I'm doing a lot of baking, hey, I'm excited to read tonight. I'm excited to relax and read tonight. Or like, hey, I can listen to my audiobook and crochet at the same time. Like, oh my gosh. It's like, it really helps to buffer the burnout. And also, too, it's like, even if you're not necessarily in a reading slump, it's like, sometimes you just need a little bit of pause. Like, okay, I need to pause reading, have my focus be somewhere else for a little bit, let myself decompress in other ways, that kind of a deal. So having other hobbies aside from reading to just help with the balance of it all. And then the very last one is, it's not so much about how bookish content creators read more, but it's like, it's just kind of like what I was saying earlier, the arguments about readers reading a lot. And it's like, reading, other hobbies are not ragged on as much as reading is. And I talked about this earlier, but it's like, you wouldn't tell someone who was gaming for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in one sitting, you wouldn't tell them, like, oh, you didn't actually game for like 6 hours today. You didn't actually game for 6 hours in one sitting today. Yet the minute someone sits down and reads for 6 hours, you're like, oh my gosh, you didn't do that. Like, and they're genuine about it, they're serious. And it's like, okay, if I had sat, and I think part of this is because of how often as a society we are on our phones, we are on screens. So doing something like gaming, again, I'm not trying to rag on these hobbies, because it's like, I play games on my phone, I watch movies, I watch TV shows, I watch YouTube. So it's like, I'm not trying to rag on these, but it's like, with how much we're spending time on one form of a screen, whether it's a phone or a computer or a tablet of some kind, an iPad or whatever it is, or a TV or a computer. Spending time on a screen has become so normalized now that, like, we don't question if someone is spending the entire day in front of the TV, watching episode after episode after episode, or movie after movie after movie, or YouTube video after YouTube video or after YouTube video. Again, not that this is necessarily bad, because like I said, I'll do it too. Like, I'll watch a bunch of my show in one sitting when I feel like I just need to, like, sit and do nothing, but I need something stimulating there. And it's like, we don't question that. We don't question the fact that someone watched 3 seasons of a show in one day. And yet, the minute someone says, I read a 400-page book in one sitting. I read a 400-page book in one day. I read a 200-page book in one sitting. I read 3 500-page books this week. The minute someone says something along those lines, it's like, no, you didn't. And seriously, I'm saying it sarcastically, but oftentimes people will seriously say, like, no, you didn't do that. And it's like, why are you telling me why are you telling me I didn't do something when I did? So it's that kind of a mentality, a thinking where it's like, why are we at a point where we seriously question whether or not someone has read a certain number of pages in one sitting or a certain number of books in a week, in a month, when people will spend that same amount of time watching multiple movies or watching the same movies on repeat, or they'll watch multiple seasons of a show or multiple shows with multiple seasons in the same amount of time. So it's like reading is ragged on more than other hobbies are, and reading is ragged upon more than other hobbies and more than how much time we're spending on our screens. So that is a big thing to take into consideration, because it's like, oftentimes a lot of readers will not be spending as much time on screens, or at the very least they'll not be spending as much time watching movies, watching TV shows, watching videos, playing games. Like, some will, quite a few will, because a lot of them have other hobbies outside of reading, but they're not spending as much time on screens as non-readers do, is my point. So that is a big consideration, because it's like, the reason why they're able to read 5, 6 plus, 10 plus, 15 plus books in a month is because it's less time spent doing other hobbies. And yes, they have other hobbies. Yes, they watch movies and TV shows and YouTube videos. But it's like, oftentimes it's like, that is balanced, equally balanced to their reading hobby. And oftentimes the reading hobby takes precedence over the other stuff. So that's my thoughts on this. That is how I have noticed, and how I personally read more, and how I personally read 10 to 15 plus books in a month. This doesn't happen every single month. There are months where I only read anywhere between 5 to 10 books a month, and there are months where I read anywhere between 10 to 20 books. Sorry, I had another alarm go off. So it's like, it doesn't happen every single month where I'm reading 20 or so books a month, but oftentimes it will be a situation where it's like, I am reading quite a few books each month. I'm most certainly reading at least 5 books a month, because I am actively making time to read over watching a YouTube video, over watching a movie, over watching a TV show. And I do a lot of watching. I watch a lot of TV shows and movies. I watch a lot of my favorites on repeats. So it's like, and I watch a lot of YouTube. So it's like, but the thing is I actively try to balance it out with my reading, and I'm actively trying to read more, because I enjoy reading, and I enjoy reading news stories. So, like I said, that's my take on it. If you have made it this far in the video, comment down below. First off, like I said, with the amount of time you spent on your phone today, the screen time. And second off, to add to that, what has been your favorite read so far this year? Comment down below with that. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.